Welcome to Aflame for Christ, timeless to set your heart on fire with love for Jesus Christ. My name is Father Joseph Gill, priest of the Diocese of Bridgeport, Connecticut, and you've joined us on this 29th Sunday of Ordinary Time. There was one time a young college student by the name of Francis who ended up being assigned a very interesting roommate, an older man, an ex-soldier, named Ignatius, who had just gone through a pretty major conversion to Christ. Now, Francis was a party animal. He wanted nothing of Ignatius's religiosity. But despite their differences, the two ended up becoming very close friends and ended up rooming together for 3 years in college. And they got along very well, except for one really annoying habit. Every single day, Ignatius would say to his friend, "Hey, Francis, what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul?" Day after day, Ignatius would say this, and Francis kind of would get rather annoyed. And he told him just be quiet, mind your own business. I'm not into that religious stuff, and this question is just kind of starting to bother me. What does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul? Ignatius kept saying over and over again, even despite Francis's objections, year after year. But because he was so persistent, it began to wear down his younger friend. Finally, in the third year of college, Francis broke down and realized that Ignatius was right. It was meaningless to pursue all the parties, the girls, the success, without even a thought to his own soul. So he finally said, "Ignatius, all right, you know what? You're right. I've been wasting my life without Christ. What should I do?" Ignatius said, "I'm starting a new group called the Company of the Savior, and I'd like you to join." So Francis agreed, and so we now know them as St. Ignatius of Loyola and St. Francis Xavier, two of the first 6 Jesuits. It was that friendship that led Francis to become a saint. All of us need friends, and our readings today are all about that. Right? In the first reading, Moses is given a task by God to help Israel win the battle by raising his hands aloft, but he couldn't do it without Aaron and Hur to help him while he grew tired. In the second reading, we see Paul writing to his friend and protege Timothy, who really was a very close collaborator in Paul's work. So neither Paul nor Moses was a lone ranger. They knew that they needed others to accomplish God's tasks. But unfortunately, in today's world, we're becoming more and more lone rangers and suffering from incredible loneliness. There was a 2020 study that's found that 28% of young men say that they have 0 close friends. 0. And so many with this loneliness are turning to technology. A Pew Research study from 2024 revealed that 67% of young adults have interacted with an AI companion. That's a website where you can have a quote-unquote conversation with a computer that responds like a real person. And 23% of young adults prefer digital relationships to human relationships. But we know that our hearts yearn for more than that. All of us, we want real, genuine relationships, real, genuine friendships. But what makes a Christian friendship unique? So Aristotle identified 3 different levels of friendships in his famous book, Nicomachean Ethics. The first one is called friendship of utility, which means that I'm friends with this person because they can do something for me. Maybe they can help my career, or maybe they're one of the cool kids, so hanging out with them is going to make me cool, or maybe they just take away my loneliness. But fundamentally, this is kind of based on using the other person and not real love. But so Aristotle mentions the second level of friendship, which he calls friendship of pleasure. So I'm friends with this person then because we like to do fun stuff together. Maybe it's our fishing buddies or our sports teammates or coworkers with whom we like to share a drink. And there's nothing wrong with these friendships, but they're kind of shallow. They don't require a huge amount of commitment. And, when you move to a new town, you don't keep in touch with all those guys. But then Aristotle mentions a third, deeper kind of friendship. And he calls it a friendship of virtue, where we have a common goal of becoming virtuous, holy people and pursuing Christ together. And this is a deep, lasting friendship that can be cemented by the bond of Jesus Christ, the only thing that endures. So how do we find these kinds of friendships? Wise priest once gave me some very profound dating advice that I think we can apply to friendships. He said, if you want to date, start running after Jesus. And once you've been running after him for a while, look around and see who's running with you. Those are the people you should date. But those are also the people that you should be friends with, people who are pursuing Christ, who are going to make you a better person. One day, and you ever open those Dove chocolates, how they have kind of silly sayings on the inside? Well, one day I opened one and found kind of a profound saying, and the saying was, your vibe attracts your tribe. It's very true, right? If you pursue Christ yourself, you're going to find Christ-centered friendships. But then, once we pursue Christ, we then have to go actually seek out the friendships instead of waiting for them to come to us. My mom had a great saying. She said, the phone works both ways. In other words, instead of waiting for someone else to take the initiative and call me, maybe I should be calling them. Right? And this is what I hear a lot from people. They're like, oh, our church is, a church is unwelcoming. Well, okay, but have you also made the effort to get to know people there? Here at our church, we've got Walking with Purpose. We've got our men's groups. We've got Youth Encounter. I know everyone says, oh, I'm an introvert. But really, we're kind of just all stuck in our middle school mindset where we're afraid of rejection, right? And that's where Christ can help us. Because if we realize that we're profoundly, passionately loved by Christ, then we can take risks in relationships because we know that we're grounded in our identity in Him. No matter whether I fit in this group or develop this friendship, maybe I will, maybe I won't, but my deeper friendship is with Christ, and that's unshakable. But there's the key. Our deepest friendship has got to be with Christ first. But let me ask, do you have only a friendship of utility with Him where you just use Him for your own benefit? I often bring food to Cardinal Kung where I teach because the best way to reach teenagers' hearts is through their stomachs, and it's also great to keep me thin. Right? So one day I had a plate of cookies, and a sixth grader named Kenny comes up and he says, Father Joseph, can I have one? I said, of course, and he grabbed one. And then he looked up at me and he said, Father Joseph, you're very easy to manipulate. Gosh, kids say the darndest things. But don't we often treat God that way, right? Like a divine vending machine? Oh, what do I want today? Healing, job, help on a test. And we put in our 3 Hail Marys and we think we just get what we want. But a lot of times, apart from asking God for stuff, we don't ever spend time with Him. And that's a friendship of utility. And that's not the point of the gospel, right? The point of the gospel talks about the good things we receive in prayer, but then He says those words that have always haunted me. When the Son of Man comes, will He find faith on the earth? In other words, are we merely just using God to get what we want? Or do we have a living faith that seeks Him for His own sake, that loves Him because He's lovable, and that trusts that He's going to give us what we really need? We develop that kind of friendship with Christ in the same way we develop any friendship. We spend time with Him, prayer, the sacraments. We listen to Him. He speaks to us through His Word in the Bible. We begin to adopt His values. We try to please Him in our thoughts, words, and deeds. And so, my friends, all of us desire friendships, deep friendships, Christian friendships. And they're going to make us happier and holier if we have Christian friends spurring us on. But most fundamentally, pursue a friendship with Christ. And then our faith really becomes less about a set of doctrines and rules and more about a love affair with a God who calls us friends.